Good afternoon, Turks and Caicos. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Governor. Acknowledge the presence of my cabinet colleagues, the Permanent Secretary for National Security, members of the press, and those who are listening by radio and TV or streaming. First of all, let me say that I value the sacred trust that the people of these Turks and Caicos Islands have put in me to lead at this crucial time. And I want to start by expressing my deepest condolences to the family of all those who have suffered loss from gun violence and other crime, particularly to those, the parents of the many young men, and I understand all of the cases in Provo have been young men who've lost their lives because of violence. I don't think enough can be said about that. But just know that we're doing everything we can to stem this tide of lawlessness. And so I stand before you today to address what I think we can all agree at this stage is a crime epidemic. And it is wreaking havoc in our country. And as your Premier, I stand and I understand your anxiety, your frustration, and the fear. The level of criminality in the Turks and Caicos Islands has shaken us all at our core. I want to acknowledge first and foremost that the rise in violent crime, aggravated robberies, sexual assaults, murder, and general lawlessness is totally unacceptable. This is not who we are as a people, and we will not tolerate this assault on our society any longer. I've heard families, business owners, spiritual leaders, and individuals worried about the safety. And I want to tell you, I hear you, and I am committed to bringing solution. My job as the Premier is to ensure that resources are available to combat all aspects of crime. I understand that many of you have wondered why I haven't spoken up on this urgent issue. Your frustration with the silence is valid, and I acknowledge it fully. But please know that my silence was not out of neglect or lack of empathy. I have visited the family of many victims, and so many of them know that I care deeply. I was not saying very much because my colleagues here, the Commissioner, the Governor, and the Cabinet members know that I've been working intensely behind the scenes, focusing on laying down a sustainable foundation to address the situations once and for all. The Commissioner has spoken to some of the work we're doing, and so the Governor has as well. And you've heard the statistics from the Commissioner of Police and the various initiatives, programs, and projects that the government is undertaking to correct this unfortunate trend. We must stand together. We must stand together regardless to political parties, denominations, color, creed, or any other categorization of us as a people. I believe in action over words. And following a marked increase in violent gun and gang crime in the Turks and Caicos Islands, the National Security Council instructed the Attorney General to draft specific pieces of legislation designed to address key issues identified by the Royal Turks and Caicos Islands Police Force as requiring urgent attention, mitigation. The Cabinet confirmed these instructions, and I mentioned a few of them. As a deterrent, the Royal Turks and Caicos Islands Police Force recommended higher sentences for the possession of firearms and a further rise for higher powered firearms, incrementally depending on the firearm. The Firearms Amendment Ordinance number 2 of 2022 introduced higher penalties for the possession and use of firearms. The Police Force Amendment Ordinance of 2022 provided for stop and search in areas of high crime to stop and search a person or a vehicle if the officer thinks the person is linked to criminal activity, and the erection of road barriers provides for the power of stop and search in anticipation of or after violence, and in some cases, even without a warrant. The Anti-Gang Ordinance of 2022 made an offense for a person to be a member of a gang. The offense carries a penalty of 10 years imprisonment for a first conviction and a penalty of 20 years imprisonment for any subsequent conviction. A gang leader is liable to imprisonment for 25 years. It is also an offense to wound or shoot at persons involved in law enforcement or intelligence, and would carry a penalty of 30 years imprisonment. So, let me be clear. My government is committed to restoring safety and peace in every corner of this country. And we are approaching this strategically, starting with addressing both the urgent and the important issues first. At the top of that list is the prevention of the ongoing murders, and then addressing the underlying social causes of violence in our society. And some of these deal directly with the long-term causes of violence, which are predominantly social, including the development of safe communities. You would have heard me speak about our expensive plan to provide safe housing for everyone who's got a legal right to be in this country. Safe communities are areas where crime is traditionally very low. A joint approach across government agencies are in place, but it will be further developed to address criminality and social issues that breed crime. Safe communities include proper housing, infrastructure, mentorship programs, counseling, and rehabilitation. In responding to the rising crime levels, we have begun to implement a series of measures aimed at restoring order and safety to our islands, and we intend to do this both swiftly and effectively. The Commissioner has spoken to some of them, and the Governor has spoken to some of them. So one of the things we intend to do immediately is the development, or deployment rather, of the mobile police station, which the Commissioner referred to as a command center, mobile command center. This piece of equipment is due to arrive, as the Commissioner indicated already, in October, around the 15th of the month. and immediately it will be deployed to areas identified as most critical. This will ensure a rapid and flexible response to incidents, bringing law enforcement close to the people. The Commissioner also referred to the reinstatement or the construction in the Turks and Caicos Islands communities, particularly in Providenciales first, the establishment of satellite police stations in key areas. And I can say that we are making strides with this. We expect by the end of this month to have architectural drawings completed and start the construction of these stations before the end of the current calendar year. I know this is something that the community has asked for, and we are intent on making sure that it is supplied. The Commissioner has spoken at length about strengthening our police force. And I say again today, as I've always said, that we will spare no expense in providing every tool that the police require to carry out their work. I think there's evidence across the Turks and Caicos Islands. Anyone who is fair and honest will know that. We've invested in tanks, invested in mobile police stations, we invested in boats, and I don't know whether I have the number here, but we have invested tens of millions of dollars in the last, I may come up against it in my notes. We've invested tens of millions of dollars in providing tools and equipment for the police, and we'll continue to do so. And of course, joint operations to combat crime, more joint operations including the Royal Turks and Caicos Islands Police Force, the Border Force, and the regiment will continue as we increase efforts to detain and repatriate those who enter our borders illegally. Commissioner gave an example of just some recent interceptions and discovery of large quantities of drugs for which people have been arrested and charged. Right? The police obviously can't be everywhere at the same time, but I think if we were to take an honest tally of what has happened, despite the violent gun crimes and the loss of life, one would have to agree that the police, and there are resource shortages and manpower shortages that the Commissioner has already alluded to that we are addressing. But given everything and the rapid development that's taking place in this country, I think the police has to be commended for the job that they are doing. What I think it's important to remember is that the choices we have is to stop growth altogether or reduce it drastically. And I don't know that that is a choice that the people of these islands would want the government to do. Other areas that we're working on is enhanced witness protection, our witness inspection program, and our collaboration with Crime Stoppers. We understand that fear of retaliation continues, and I think we all have heard stories of fear of retaliation. We understand this factor, and the most well-trained individuals are often hesitant to share what they know. However, we need the help of citizens The commissioner said it, and I say it again. The police can do everything they can, but the police alone cannot solve crime. It requires everyone. There's a cacophony of noise at the moment coming from various corners, right? And I would say today that talk is cheap. The government is putting its money where its mouth is. We are prepared and committed to resolving the problem. And yes, it may take time, but we will do it. We'll get to the bottom of it, and we'll make this country safe again. And for those who want to beat their chests and big barrels and make noise, you can go ahead and do so. But this government is interested in bringing solution to the people, as we have done in many, many different areas, and we will continue to do, to make our streets and our communities safe again. And in order to assist those persons who come forward, we will be looking at how we can enhance the witness protection program to make sure those persons are taken or moved out of harm's way. So we are developing improved programs. We are also collaborating closely, as I said, with Crime Stoppers, and are prepared to increase rewards to encourage the public to come forward with information. And I want to say to some of the families and friends of these young men who are involved in the gang culture, if you have knowledge that they are involved, and if you've done everything to try to deal with the problem, I think you owe yourself and the country a duty to bring the matter to the attention of law and order. And for those families who are aware that their children, young men, may be involved, you may be saving that young man's life by bringing that matter to the police. And so I appeal for you to do so. Tackling crime is the top priority of this government. Tourism is our bread and butter. It is what pays the bill. It is what we all depend on to make a livelihood. And so let me be unequivocal. Tackling crime is our top priority. And is a priority that we do not take lightly. And we will not allow this to define these Turks and Caicos Islands. We will spare, as I said earlier, no resources to quell this nasty scourge on our nation. We will not rest. We will not rest until our communities are safe. And those who threatened that safety will be vigorously brought to justice. So we will mix justice with compassion, and we'll provide and are providing rehabilitative opportunities. But know this, that those persons who are intent on spoiling the reputation of this country and putting people's lives in danger, they will be brought to justice. So I will make an appeal to the gang members: put your weapons down, and whether you want to go to your pastor or someone else you trust, if you have a weapon that you want to leave somewhere, please do so. I appeal to you to do everything to protect your own life. Safe communities I spoke to earlier are ones that are properly supplied with human amenities and are less likely to breed crime. And so we're committed to delivering safe communities. Various departments will be continue to be given sufficient resources to restore law and order throughout the country. The Royal Turks and Caicos Islands Police Force again, the commissioner has spoken to the crime statistics, so I wouldn't go there. But what I would say to you is that we are finalizing plans for increased police presence, working with community and partnerships, comprehensive reforms that will address not just the symptoms, but the root causes of this problem. And in the coming days, you will see an increased law enforcement presence on the streets. Commissioners speak to the need for a surge. What I can say to you is that over the last week or so, I've been working with regional and international partners to try to assist to make sure that that surge takes place. And by a surge, we mean additional boots on the ground to assist the Turks and Caicos Islands police force. I am not in a position to say more now, but the commissioner knows exactly what I'm speaking about, and so does the governor. And so we will be launching new initiatives to work hand in hand with communities to empower residents and leaders to be part of the solution. Because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And as I always say, it's sometimes easier to curse the darkness than to light a candle. And for those persons who are intent on cursing the darkness, I appeal to you, for God's sakes, light a candle. We are ramping up efforts to crack down on organized crime, strengthening our justice system, because it's all has to work hand in hand. Looking at properly resourcing the courts, finding proper accommodation for the courts. We've recently hired new assistants or new resources for the Director of Public Prosecution's office. Law and order is critical and important to this country. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that it is a staple of our society. And so we are resourcing the justice system, expanding rehabilitation programs that are often, sometimes the only and the real hope for those at risk of falling between the crack and into criminality. And I want to say some final words here, because we're all in this together. And there are those who would seek to sort of drive a wedge between the work that we try to do. The job of the commissioner is very important, and the job of the governor is very important. And what I would like to say is that I work very closely with the commissioner and with the governor. And yes, I'm saying so because I have to say so. I believe in some ways the UK government has let us down. At the end of the day, they are responsible for national security. And they have not delivered everything they've promised. Right? And I believe, and I continue to ask, for some physical presence of boots on the ground to act as a deterrent to help to protect our borders. Under our system, our parliamentary system, soldiers are not allowed to take place in civic activity, so they're not to do the job of police officers. But I see no reason why, and I have been given some which I don't accept, why it wouldn't be possible for the UK to provide a small number of military persons to assist us in protecting our borders. I think the deterrent, that kind of presence would send a strong, strong message. I'm going to continue to press at that door, right? And the governor knows that we've spoken just a couple of days ago to send another follow-up letter to the UK, because we need the UK to decide and tell us plainly whether the overseas territories, including the Turks and Caicos Islands, is considered a part of the United Kingdom border in terms of the responsibility to make sure it is safe. So at the end of the day, though, Turks and Caicos, this is our country, right? And at the end of the day, if we have to stand alone, we will have to agree to stand alone and bite the bullet and do whatever it takes to protect it. Because this is our little piece of paradise. This is our little piece of the world. And we have to protect it regardless of whether we get that assistance or not. So, I end there. And I want to reassure Turks and Caicos again that while I understand the fear and the concern, and while this government is fully committed, we all have to be committed. Crime and the eradication of it is all of our business. So for those armchair commentators who will just speak to it or against it without doing anything and without assisting, I would say you are doing your country a disservice. So I'm stretching out my hands to the opposition. I'm stretching out my hands to civic society, including the Council of Churches, to say, let's join hands and do something about it. It's not enough to speak out and then recoil back into our comfortable zones and do nothing about it. If we are going to succeed, we have to back the police. We have to support government initiatives, right? And that is the way we're going to succeed, and that is the way we're going to eradicate crime. So may God bless